We're recording. Morning, Lois.
Hello, Melanie. So nice to see you.
And you. Thank you so much for taking part with this. Now, I can't really say I'm talking to Lois Cliff the blah yet because your journey hasn't reached a destination. It's being an adventure on the way, isn't it?
That's a very kind and generous way of putting things. Thank you.
So let's go back years, not saying to when you first decided you wanted to be a teacher. Were you one of those who lined the teddy bears up and taught them, or were you one of those who was approaching graduation and thinking, what the hell do I do next?
So funnily enough, anything I did that I can remember about when I was little in terms of my free time, I wrote stories. But so I was at uni in the late 80s, and the milk round convinced me, because I was very easily convinced, that I ought to be a trainee chartered accountant.
Did that to me too.
Yeah, I didn't know that about you. There we go.
My degree was actually accounting in modern languages.
Okay, I didn't know that. Oh my God.
Okay. I was bobbins at it. But anyway, carry on. Not about me.
Totally,
about you?
Totally the same. So I survived that for 9 months and absolutely hated it. I had, obviously, at this point, you know this, but your audience don't. I'd got married 2 weeks after graduating, very foolishly. So I did the chartered accountancy thing, despised it, and was absolutely rubbish at it for 9 months, and got the heck out as soon as I possibly could, and was convinced by family of obviously long-time ex-husband that teaching would be a very good career for me for when I had the children. Very conservative, quite old-fashioned, traditional family values there. I had always said that the one thing I would never do, because my dad had joined the profession very, very late, and it had basically caused him major stress and brought him quite close to a breakdown, I think. The one thing I'd never do was be a teacher. Guess what? I became an English and drama teacher. Anyway, so that's the background. That's why I taught, because I was convinced to do so despite my better principles. I taught English. My second subject was drama. I taught language, literature, and media studies. And in the end, I taught A-level. I taught all 3 A-levels at one point. That was interesting. Whilst learning to be a head of English at the same time in a new school. That was an interesting time of life. But yeah, so that's the background.
So I've just learned several things there that despite having known you for 20 odd years, I didn't know. But so given that you weren't the most motivated teacher, you had a pretty long career. So over the course of that career, how many schools did you work in? Obviously, you've just said you were head of English in one, but how many schools, what was like the trajectory of your career then over?
Okay, so in the very early stages of my career, I was actually in the throes of getting a divorce. My marriage survived till I was 24, so 3 years basically, and it wasn't happy, and it was terribly traumatic and grim, actually. And I was going to have left teaching, and I was going to have gone to Italy and done a TEFL qualification and done the thing that I had wanted to do for a very long time, which was to become fluent in Italian, which is the language I adore above all languages. But then I met somebody, and he said, no, I'm not going to do a long distance relationship. You can have Italy or you can have me. And we were married for 24 years, and we have 2 beautiful sons, and he is now remarried to somebody who I hope brings him much more happiness than I ever did. And yeah, that was 2020. So I was going to have left teaching. I did leave teaching. I left teaching so that my lovely school Church of England Comp, the first school I ever taught at, funnily enough, where husband number 2 had gone to school and was teaching. I left so that that lovely English department could get the pick of the trainee English teachers coming for interview. So I'd left in the February and I was going to go to Italy, and then I decided not to do that. And I stayed in this country and hung out with the man I then married a couple of years later. So I needed another job in teaching. So I went to teach at Macmillan College, which I think you know, in sunny Middlesbrough, CTC, a City Technology College. I taught Steph McGovern, the BBC's very own. Yes, I did. I once had a class of 36 year 8s. 36, not 86, 36 year 8s. That was hell on wheels. That was really interesting. But I was responsible for Key Stage 4 there in my second year of teaching. And then I left that because it was a complete bedlam and got back into a normal school, which was Acklam Grange, as it was then.
It's funny, isn't it, where Mr. Grammar Tickler's dad taught.
There we go. Yes, and that's how because I know that my ex-husband knew him because he knew Paul, because he'd been at uni with Paul, and he said, look out for Paul's dad, and you need to look for somebody who looks like Father Christmas. And I saw this guy in the staff room looking at the notice board, and I thought, I know exactly who that is. And I said, hello, are you Mr. Cotton? So funny. And I was responsible for Key Stage 3 there. So I had a management point, whatever we called them back in the day. And then I got pregnant with Tobias. And I hadn't actually been at the school for 2 minutes. So I don't think it was flavour of the month. It wasn't quite a planned thing. You're getting a flavour of my life here. I don't do planning. I try planning, but I always end up going with plan B anyway, or plan C or plan D or plan Q, whatever it is. So I was back at work full-time with baby number 1 when he was 6 months old, which I didn't want to be at all, but I was told that that's the way it had to be because we could not afford to live on one salary. I should have said, absolute rubbish, husband. And this is not the way I want to live my life. And this is contrary to my ethos and my values. I should have stuck up for myself, but I didn't. Again, the theme continues to play out in the background.
So you went back, and then it wasn't long after that before you moved from the northeast to the northwest, was it? I think.
No, that's right. So husband had got a job as an EAZ advisor in Middlesbrough, which is right at the bottom of the league tables. And that's the job that got him his first senior management role as assistant head at a big comp in Manchester. So we moved down to Altrincham, and that's where we lived. That's where he still lives. And that's where our boys grew up. So I took a little bit of time because I had new baby and 3-year-old when we moved. And I think I had 4 terms where I wasn't teaching with the 2 little ones, 4 terms of mat leave in total. I worked part-time. I worked full-time at Lim High in Cheshire.
I think, should we not identify schools particularly?
Okay, all right, yep, okay. So I did full-time and then went part-time because it was just so stressful, so demanding, trying to be the best mummy, trying to be somebody who kept all the education balls in the air, trying to have a life for myself, health, wellness, do exercise, dropping balls right, left and centre. Had the conversation, said, husband, I can't do this anymore. And he said, okay, well, in that case, I think he was playing devil's advocate. He said, well, in that case, you have to resign. And I said, okay, I will. And I don't think he was very happy. But obviously he was moving up the ladder. And yes, we had a relatively large mortgage for back then, but also his salary was increasing. Yeah, we just weren't very good at adjusting lifestyle choices to income.
Yeah. Was it champagne lifestyle on a beer income? I think you said to
That's the one. His dad used to say, give the cat another goldfish, which always made me chuckle.
So from my memory, you taught at 1, 2, 3, 4, is it 5 schools in the Northwest? Ending up being head.
I think in total I've done eight schools. There was an independent school, there was a grammar school, there was another grammar school, there was a comp, and I was doing tutoring as well, and we did a little bit of work on the interwebnets for Channel 4. I don't know if you remember that. Back in the day, that's when Toby was very little. No, Toby was little, and I had a newborn baby, and I was still juggling that whilst the husband was working away, because I was up there in the Northeast for a while until we sold the house. Yeah, it was mental. Mental.
So, having kept all those balls in the air for all those years, fast forward to, I'm trying to remember when it was it about 2018, 2019 when you finally decided that was enough?
Birthday 49 was salutary because of the way my head is with numbers, because of the way my head is. I was in my 50th year. That's a significant thing. Anything that ends with noughts is significant, isn't it, for us humanoids? And I just knew that I didn't like my life. I didn't have any balance. I had no health. I had no sense of wellness for myself. I didn't feel I was doing anything properly. And I knew I was drinking at the Last Chance Saloon. If I wanted to ever write for a living, which I had tried, I'd had a couple of, when the husband said, you've got to resign then, and I said, okay, I will. I'm a creator, and I made artisan marmalades and chutneys and jams. Yes. The case of the hidden jam jars didn't go down very well. I had tried to be a creator and run a business, but it was, I look back and I just laugh because it was mental and ridiculous and so ill-advised and so rash. But when you know that you have ADHD later in life, you find that out, you look back and it all makes perfect sense. Of course you would buy 2,000 jam jars without mentioning it to your spouse and hide them around the house under things and behind things and covered with duvets on tops of wardrobes. Of course you would do that. It's totally rational and sensible and obvious, because I knew he wasn't going to support me for love, because he wasn't able to. No, it wasn't in him. Yes.
So that attempt to escape unfortunately didn't work.
It didn't. But the birthday 49 thing. We got to Christmas 2018, I think, and I left. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, because my first bit of writing was January 2019, and that was my first year as a freelancer, which it was a massive risk, and it was a huge leap of faith in myself, and for somebody who had no self-esteem, in fact no sense of self, never mind esteem of that self, it was like, oh my God, what am I doing? But I know I have to do it. I just knew that if I didn't do it then, I would never do it. And I would die bitter and twisted with a sense of everything left undone. And I couldn't bear to do that to myself. So there's a guy over in Georgia, a lovely guy who is a copywriter. And nobody in my world knew what a copywriter was. Even the husband had to have it explained to him because he thought it was something to do with copyright law.
Right. That crops up. So Catherine, who is the episode before yours, she said she didn't know what a copywriter was when she was thinking about leaving.
So obviously the chances of getting published as a writer, I had tried writing fiction for children. Do you remember the Candy Floss Dragons? And you know what? I got a call from a publisher, Lois, have you got anything else? This is not our cup of tea, but if you've got anything else, send it. You know what? I should have just banged in a sickie for a week and written the hell out of my everythings and just sent them anything. But I didn't understand what that was. That was a thing that said, you can write. What have you got? Send anything else. And I just did not understand what that was. So I read Peter Bauman's book, The Well-Fed Writer, and I bought a resource. I forget how much it was. It was a few dollars, certainly not more than 100. I cannot remember. It might have been 37. I honestly can't remember numbers. But that was my investment. I announced to my husband what I was doing pretty much. It was a bit of a fait accompli in my head. And he understood that and he didn't take kindly to it. And it took him probably a year, 18 months to forgive me. I don't know. But we talked about this as we moved towards divorce and after we'd separated. And I was living elsewhere from the marital home in 2020, sorry. So he bankrolled me for a year, bless him, tried to understand what it was. So we'd look at an advert on TV and he'd see, he'd got the understanding now, and he'd say, so a copywriter wrote that. And I would say, yes. And then, you know, he'd hear something on the radio as we were traveling in the car and he'd say, oh, a copywriter wrote that. And I would say, yes. And, you know, all the time I was listening to podcasts, faking it till I made it, going to networking meetings, reading books, you know, some of them are still there, listening to Content DNA as an audio book, and, you know, just trying to be the person I wanted to become and get paid something. Just getting paid something. But as you know, in your first year of doing it, you ridiculously undercharge and undervalue yourself because you don't know what the value is that you bring to the table. I did some training in how to run a business for free at the Google Academy.
Now that's interesting that you did that, because everybody I've spoken to so far for this project, but also in my own business life, we always say, you know, freelancers and solopreneurs, you might have trained. So like I obviously did proofreading training. You train to do the thing that you're going to, that's going to generate your revenue. But who actually trains to be a small business owner? So it's interesting that you did, because nobody I've spoken to so far has done.
Yeah.
And it's a thing that we've struggled with. So tell me about the Google Academy. What's that?
So Google Academy, I think it was Google saying, you know, we have to do something that is charitable and sort of helps people. And obviously that's a tax break, I think, isn't it, for a big business? But they set up lots and lots of digital online spaces and physical spaces. So they just used retail premises and made them into spaces like little hubs where you could go and talk to people who would help you, and you could sign up and you could do courses. And I would go into Manchester to a really nice space on King Street. And if you know King Street, Manchester, it's a nice place to hang out, isn't it? I joined the Institute of Directors because I was a limited company. Whether that was wrong or right for the time is another matter, but I met some lovely people who I'm still in touch with and went to some interesting trainings and networking meetings, again in lovely spaces. And that was one of the most joyous things, because I love architecture, I love history, I love space and looking at how it's used. And I got to see some amazing spaces in Manchester buildings that I just would not have seen otherwise. So that was a fantastic eye-opener for me. But the Google business thing was me understanding something about myself, you know, failed trainee, chartered accountant. I have 2 E's at maths O level. My Poppy has come to say hello.
I've just seen his bell walk past you.
You know, so it was me recognizing my weaknesses and attempting somewhat belatedly to sort of fill some gaps, really. But if you make me look at a spreadsheet with numbers in it, it literally makes my stomach churn. I feel ill. And I know why that is now.
Mm.
There's an awful lot of tangled webbery and stuff that I still need to unpick from my distant childhood that's going on there, you know, processing of my subconscious from a very early age. But did it help me? I think it helped me. It made me feel I was doing something valuable. It was something I could say to my ex-husband, look, I am doing this. I am aware of my shortcomings and trying to fix them. So I'm hoping that he understood that that was what was in my head. I was doing it for him, for us, as well as for me. But my business acumen is not good. And yeah, that was a barrier, I think, to my success. But, you know, the biggest barrier to my success in a way is having ADHD, undiagnosed ADHD for my entire life. Yeah, so several false starts, I think, probably largely attributable to that. And it was only Toby's diagnosis, which is what, 2 years ago now, son number one's diagnosis, that made me question my own sort of mental setup. And I only did that because he said, Mum, I've got a PDF here, ADD symptoms, have a look. And I think I checked 90% of those boxes.
Mm.
So why the NHS doesn't want to tell me that I've got ADHD isn't a bizarre thing, but to me it just doesn't matter, because the penny dropped and everything is now everything to play for, because I know and I can take measures to deal with and to help myself, which make things happen.
Yeah. And do you think your growing awareness of that and coming to terms with it and developing the self-awareness is what has led you now sort of away from concentrating on copywriting towards the life coaching thing that I know you're training for
Yeah,
now?
I think so. I mean, the writing of copy, content creation, I love creating content on LinkedIn. Short form is ideal for me. Fancy that. You know, I can create something in 10 minutes or 20 minutes, or, you know, my newsletter that goes out every other week, you know, that'll take me 2, 3, maybe 4 hours because of pictures and creating alt text and all of that stuff. But that in an ADHD context is a totally manageable, doable thing. But because of the way my head is, where I see the big picture, including the biophilia piece, which is my most recent discovery, and which Toby is at pains to say, you know, Mum, that is just your latest hyperfocus. You do know that, don't you? But actually, I have so many hyperfocuses, hyperfoci. I see it, I have recently sort of used the analogy of the blunderbuss. It's like a blunderbuss has gone off in my head. That's how my conscious brain is. So as well as seeing the big picture, I can see so many of the dots that make up the big picture. And sometimes it looks like a tangled mess of a dot-to-dot picture. And then sometimes it looks like, oh, she's drawing a chicken. And you can see that it's meant to be a chicken. Sorry, that's a Stretford grammar thing. Sorry. That nice place in Manchester that I might have taught at once. Anyway.
You're not saying anything nasty about them, so that's fine.
No, it was a wonderful, my favourite school ever. Best school ever. So because of who I am, because of my journey, I think, it's a journey to my wholeness and my wellness and my bestness. And it was a guy in BNI, actually, in South Manchester, who not literally, but metaphorically sort of had me by the throat in the corner, backed up, who made me say what my why was and why it was that. Because I was the disempowered child growing up. And my why is empowerment of, it's been children historically. And last year I wanted to get into schools, but schools I don't really think have the budget for me. And I have to make them think. Yeah. So I'm doing the coaching thing now because I want to empower anybody, but small and medium businesses where I can talk to 50 or 100 people in one go, and I can give them a takeaway of one thing. And it might be something to do with food. It might be something to do with movement, exercise. It might be something to do with mindfulness. It might be something to do with playfulness. It might be something to do with space, inside or outside. It could be anything, but because I see all the dots and how they join up to make the better, more healthy whole, I'm doing the coaching course now to give me some social proof, some credibility that maybe, having been an educator and a head of English, you know, for all of those years, doesn't give me in the world of business, so that I can continue my journey of empowering people, one person at a time, on the grounds that a rising tide lifts all boats. So it's not, I'm not a finished product, but hell, if I ever sit down and think, I'm a finished product, that's the time I probably need to go and bury myself, because there's something wrong in my head. Yeah. We ain't never going to be finished products, are we? Until the moment we draw our last breaths, and then we're finished.
Yeah. So the coaching qualification, flash us that folder that you showed me before we started.
Yeah, okay. This other coaching qualification providers are available.
Yeah. So this is you're doing this online at your own speed.
Yes, hopefully a slightly faster speed than historically I have managed. But I can coach alongside the doing of the qualification. That's part of it. That, you know, that's part of what makes it successful.
Yeah. I suppose it's like when we did our PGCEs, we had to do teaching practice.
Yeah. And when I look at the way I've taught, I have quite a coachy style. Obviously, I'm a didact as well, but I like people. I'm not a spoon feeder, and that's part of why I left teaching, because it was all about spoon feeding to get them to the exam grade that was expected of them or above. And that's not about the kid. That's about something entirely different, the agenda of the school, which, no, I don't see children as percentage points, and never will.
No.
So, yeah.
Well, the people who make the decision to measure them like that, generally speaking, aren't the ones standing in front of them, are they? Hey. So if it's not an indiscreet question, how much does a coaching course cost? Because that could be quite a barrier for some people.
Yeah. So this was my gap year, which obviously went a bit pear-shaped for personal reasons, you know, back in August. I'm still an educator in my head, so my gap year was starting in September, but obviously there was unwellness in my family that had to take priority. So this was the year that I was actually going to do something for myself educationally. I was going to invest in myself. So this is a spend that I have decided to make on behalf of myself, and it's a 4-figure sum. Coaching qualifications vary hugely. You can get one for something that starts with a $3 grand or so, and you can get them that start with a 5. You add VAT, you know, you get on the extras because you've got to be coached, so you need to pay a coach. So it's not an insignificant amount of money. Sorry, I'm not being very specific there, because basically I don't remember numbers. Can remember any amount of words in various languages, particularly when they're spliced together in beautiful ways, but I don't remember numbers. But, you know, I'm paying $3 grand something for this. So it is incumbent upon me to make that work, because otherwise that's a waste of money. And I don't like to waste money. So, yeah. But that's a pretty much, more or less, the only money that's ever been spent on me, by me, or a significant other in my life. So I'm figuring, you know, age 53, I am worth it.
For sure. So you hope to have this finished, qualified, the diploma in your back pocket within about 6 months, you were saying before.
That's my plan. Yep.
Right. Okay. So, and then you'll set up your coaching business and give that your best shot. How would you feel if you didn't immediately start to build a business with that, if there was a bit of a hiatus, you know, you started, you're out there, you're posting on LinkedIn, you're networking, how would you feel if, because I think a lot of people watching this might worry that, okay, I've invested this money, I've got to set up a business to push it. Do you feel, are you going to set yourself an arbitrary time limit? If it hasn't started working within X number of months or years, then I'll decide that,
Yeah.
well, I'm going to be a coach, I'll go to something else. Or, because I think people worry that they've got to have a plan in place for when they leave. And if it doesn't work quite quickly, then it's back into the classroom, it's doing supply. How do you see your future development with this going?
Okay, this is a really interesting one. And obviously my personal context is very specific to me because, you know, I bought a house and I made some money on it because I did it up. And now I've bought another house and there is some money in the bank to do this one up, and hopefully I will at least make my money back. But, you know, I'm in a very privileged position. I do understand that. I'm not being bankrolled by an ex-husband anymore. The pressure is on for me. I feel that quite intensely. But I am sort of bankrolling myself this year to the sort of tune of minimum wage, give or take. Mere numbers. It's not an exact science. But yeah, there is very much an agenda where I am going to say, I need clients. I need clients this year for certain. And if it doesn't work, then I suppose, you know, I've got a teacher's pension in a few years. I will not go back to a classroom under anybody else's auspices other than my own. If I'm in a classroom, it's because a school is paying me to be a well-being, holistic well-being consultant, bouncy tigger, bringing some children some well-being and some chances of mental health improvement. That's the only way I'm going to be in a classroom again. And I have sworn that to myself on my life, on the life of my children and my dog. What is also in my mind at the moment, and we haven't talked about this, so I don't think you're aware of this. One of my jobs for this week is to get a resume that slays and pays, a kick-ass resume, up and running, because part of me, because of the person I am, I cannot be without funds. I have to be able to pay my bills. That's everybody. Everybody has to pay their bills. And shall we not talk about the size of bills at the moment, because it's just very concerning, isn't it?
Yes.
And if I was a young single parent, you know, I don't know how I'd be paying bills at the moment. So I am deeply aware at core level of how very bloody privileged I am. I really, really am mindful of that. But I'm not going to leave this to chance. I want clients. I believe I can get clients, and I believe in the value I am bringing to the world at large. Whether that is somebody who has lost their way or just knows they need more direction as an individual, who I bump into, who says, do you just coach businesses or can you coach me? Hell yes, I can coach an individual. But actually, businesses, if I can coach 50 individuals and there are 50 takeaways of one thing, that rising tide lifts all boats. That's really where I want to be, because that's me saying I can spread myself this thin and there is a benefit to the world of my doing that, rather than spending an hour with one person. You know, everybody matters, but actually, I'm 53. Life is short. I need to get out there and get on with this. But if it doesn't work, Melanie, then there's a resume and I'm out there on LinkedIn and my brand is there and my pillars of what I stand for, what are the hills that I would die on, what is my mountain, and there's a business there that will employ me and pay me a salary and possibly even put some money into a pension pot. And oh, the joy of having a salary and a pension pot, you know. Yeah, I totally get that. That was the thing about teaching that I really didn't appreciate, because I was so exhausted and didn't like my life. But yeah, I totally appreciate that bit of it.
Yeah.
Now it's gone.
We are imminently going to run out of time on my
Yeah.
being a cheapskate, only having the free Zoom. So do you have one golden nugget of advice that you could leave us with? Yes, just one.
Okay, that's really hard for me, Melanie Cotton. I hate you.
That's
Right. Okay. Do you know what? The biggest thing, and I wish somebody had said this to me in a way that mattered, that my neuro spicy brain could take on board when I was 14, 13, 7, 5. The one thing, believe in yourself. I deleted an expletive there for you, my friend. Believe,
Mm.
because you are a long time dead. I'm not a person of faith. I'm not coming back. Maybe I was here before, who knows? But, you know, I'm going to be atoms and molecules. And right now I am atoms and molecules that live and breathe and can kick some ass. And I'm going to make it happen. But I've been a long time getting to this point.
Yeah.
Believe it. Do it. You've got one shot. Get the heck on with it.
And on that very firm piece of advice, I'll say that. Thank you so much.
Are you impressed? That was one thing, wasn't it?
That's very good.